Russia says it will help clear mines from the ancient Syrian city of Palmyra, which was liberated from Islamic State on Sunday. And Moscow gives an open invitation to world leaders to join the effort. In further aircrew testimony obtained by RT, a former pilot with Emirates Airlines claims staff are being punished for calling in sick over fatigue. And an Israeli soldier is captured on video shooting an injured Palestinian in the head after an alleged stabbing attempt in the West Bank. Hello there, you're watching RT International live from Moscow with me, Nikki Aaron. The Russian Ministry of Defense has announced it will send anti-mine experts and military robots in the next few days to help clear explosives in the newly liberated ancient Syrian city of Palmyra. Syrian officials say numerous booby traps were laid by retreating ISIL fighters. President Assad's military forces have already started demining the city.
Russia has pledged to send in both explosive or demining experts, and as well as that robots which are used to to detonate explosives which have been left in the ruins or in alleged buildings. Obviously, ISIL has a long history of leaving a large number of booby traps and other such explosives all over areas it has just held occupied. So this is a very, very serious task which must be undertaken. It should be noted that the Russian President Vladimir Putin spoke to UNESCO and pledged his support in removing explosive devices from Palmyra, and as well as that, Russia has invited all members of the international community in demining the area, obviously because it is such a historically important site.
The significance of Palmyra doesn't lie just in its unique cultural heritage. The city also lies at a strategic crossroads in central Syria, halfway between Damascus and Islamic State's de facto capital, Raqqa. By recapturing Palmyra, the Syrian army now has a key launching point for future offensives. In these aerial shots, you can see the Greco-Roman landmarks to the city's southwest, many of which have been reduced to rubble by ISIL over the past 10 months. Earlier, we talked to locally based journalist Allah Ibrahim, who was with Syrian troops during the battle for Palmyra.
I can say that the few days I spent with the army gave me insight onto two major facts. The first fact is that the Syrian army, after the cessation of hostilities, was able to reallocate forces from across the country and sending them as reinforcement to Palmyra without undermining its ability to hold other fronts, and that is because of the recent cessation of hostilities. The other fact that I was very intrigued by is that the Russian assistance is still going on, and maybe at a higher pace than it was before the announcement of the withdrawal of the major force. And I think this explains why the radical group was caught off guard.
For the Syrian army, retaking Palmyra is not only a strategic victory, but also a symbolic one. The Syrian army says its success proves it's capable of fighting Islamic State alone and doesn't need other countries who say they may introduce forces on the ground.
النقاط الأمامية واقتحامها ودحر الأعداء خلال ساعات قليلة. بعد ذلك نجحنا التسلل إلى العمق وسيطرنا على التلال المشرفة على تدمر، ومنهدي هذا النصر إلى أمنا سوريا.
According to witnesses, the sense of relief after the liberation of the city was tangible. Some soldiers even started up a game of football on the recaptured streets. Apart from the UN and UNESCO, there's so far been little international reaction following the Syrian army's success. NATO has declined to comment on the liberation of the ancient city. The Russian embassy in the UK posted a picture on Twitter saying, "Keep calm and keep silent," apparently as a response to the lack of reaction to the victory in Palmyra. RT's Laura Smith has more.
The most interesting thing about the international reaction is that there hasn't been that much international reaction. Back in May 2015, when Palmyra was first taken by IS, there was a whole lot of hand-wringing about ancient artifacts and lost culture. But when just a few days ago, the spokesman for the US State Department was asked how he would feel if Palmyra was retaken, he wasn't particularly enthusiastic. Let's hear what he had to say.
We, of course, our priority, and I said this yesterday, is defeating and destroying Daesh. That remains our priority. And yet, we also recognize that replacing Daesh's barbaric rule with Assad's tyranny is not a great trade-off or a great solution.
So it seems the suggestion there is that even after all this, the US isn't fully behind defeating ISIL. What it really wants to do, in fact, is oust Assad, just what it's wanted to do all along. And so it follows that from David Cameron and from President Obama, absolutely nothing. And even the British media is asking why not. There's an article in The Independent today by Robert Fisk, their veteran Middle East correspondent. He says, here are the Syrian army, backed, of course, by Vladimir Putin's Ruskies, as he calls them, chucking the clowns of ISIS out of town, and we daren't utter a single word to say well done. Now, there are notable exceptions. Of course, there are always exceptions. We've heard from the former US ambassador to Russia. He responded to a tweet by the Russian embassy. He just wrote spasiba, which of course means thank you in Russian. And then here in the UK, we've heard from the inimitable Boris Johnson, who's the London mayor. He called the victory very much to the credit of the Russians. He said it made the West look relatively ineffective. Of course, everything happens for a reason. Boris is likely to have noticed Cameron's silence on the issue and wanted to distinguish himself by making this statement. He's setting up to be the next leader of the Conservative Party. But from world leaders, nothing.
Bill Law, a journalist and expert on the Middle East, thinks the retaking of Palmyra presents a difficult situation for Washington and London.
For the West, it presents something of a dilemma because Washington, the UK, doesn't want to see Assad as a solution. They want to see Assad gone, but of course what he's done by recapturing Palmyra is to have really staked a very strong claim to maintaining his presence, and it buttresses his argument that he, with the support of the Russians, are really taking the war to ISIS and to the terrorists. It is a very important victory in the war against Daesh.
Palmyra, known as the Venice of the Sands, is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, but Islamic State fighters have reduced a number of cultural landmarks to dust. We spoke to the man in charge of Syria's heritage and whose job it is now to restore what remains.
We cried so many times. We lost a lot of the hopes through the 2015. How we can accept all this destruction on the cultural heritage in Palmyra. But now it is the end of this tragedy. Now we have some joy. The first image coming from Palmyra, from National Museum, that the big a statue of Lat, it is good, it's under control, it's broken, it is not destroyed completely. The landscape in Palmyra is good, it's not destroyed. We are sure that Daesh do it a lot of destruction by illicit excavation in the city. I need to go with my staff tomorrow, after tomorrow, to Palmyra to do the damage assessment. We will share all the information with UNESCO because Palmyra, it's not just for the Syrian people, it's for the humanity. We need to give to terrorists new message, the message of the international community, how we can be strong together.
One of the largest museums in the world, Russia's Hermitage, has promised to help restore Palmyra to its pre-war state. The museum's director says winning the city back from the terrorists is not enough, and it's just as important to restore its beauty. The Hermitage and St. Petersburg itself may have more in common with Palmyra than first meets the eye.